The sugar tax was implemented and introduced into the UK in April of 2018. And what this video is going to look at is why did the government feel that there was a need to place a sugar tax, and what the consequences of this tax or what the consequences will be. So the video will consider the whole reason as to why the government felt they had to intervene in this kind of market failure. Now, the reason why it could be suggested that market failure is taking place is because of the type of good that these sugary drinks are. The sugary drinks could be accused of being a demerit good. First of all, they're being overconsumed, but the harms to society is starting to be really acknowledged, especially in terms of healthcare. So if we think about how much sugar is in your drinks that you might consume on a daily basis, especially the likes of Coca-Cola, which is a very, very popular drink, we can see in a 330 millilitre can, there's 35 grams worth of sugar. And what it's been proven by healthcare specialists and medical researchers is that this amount of sugar in these drinks are being extremely harmful in terms of obesity, in terms of tooth decay, and just in terms of also, diabetes. So as we can see in this image towards the bottom of the screen, we can see that 34.6% has been proven by research for ill health in the UK is based on poor diet. That's more so than tobacco, that's more so than alcohol, and it's more so than physical inactivity. I mean, obviously there are links, especially in terms of poor diet and maybe physical inactivity, but what they're suggesting is fatty foods and sugary contents is a leading issue when it comes to the healthcare of the UK population, and also globally as well. So how the sugar tax will work. First of all, there are going to be two different types of tax brackets based on the sugar content. So if one's got a higher sugar content, they'll get taxed more. The one with the lower sugar content will get a smaller tax burden based on that. So for example, if you look at the Coca-Cola, which I mentioned before, the old price was 68p, the new price is going to be 76p. And the whole reason for that, as this article says, this article headline, the sugar tax on soft drinks could prevent tens of thousands from becoming obese, and that's what the new study says, and that's what the government are really acting on. They're acting on the advice from healthcare specialists. So just to give you a little bit more information, I'm just going to show you a video based on an ITV broadcast of this year.
It starts as a sugary syrup and is funnelled into an industry selling billions of litres a year. Youngsters between 4 and 18 consume most sugar, and the Chancellor's surprise announcement got cheers from seasoned campaigners.
Shocked, surprised, been working on this for a long time, wanted the government to be brave. I think this was a big, bold, brave, unconventional move.
And with children's teeth, the impact can be most graphic, the #1 cause of hospital admissions for this age group. But this father says soft drinks are only part of the problem.
Yeah, they've got sugar in everything, but it's a bit difficult to control.
It breaks your heart. You've suddenly got this child coming in who's never met you before, and you've saying the need to have 10 teeth out, or lots and lots of work in a quite a stressful environment for that child, and it's not their fault.
Companies that produce drinks with between 5 and 8 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres will be charged 18p per litre. It includes drinks like these. And a higher tax of 24p per litre on the companies who produce drinks with more than 8 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres. It will raise an estimated £520 million each year for primary school sport. Firms have 2 years to change recipes and will decide whether to pass on extra costs to customers.
There are around 6 teaspoons of sugar in a typical serving of this cola. But this isn't just about what goes into sugary products like this. It's also about how they're being sold. And changing that could be as big a shake-up as transforming the recipes.
The soft drinks industry says it's already cut sugar by almost 14% in the last 3 years. And big retailers aren't leaping to instant conclusions, but have always stressed that customers' tastes take time to adjust.
although customers want us to reduce sugar, it needs to be done in nice, small steps. So typically we will be taking out 5 or 6% at a time, and we've done that for each of the last 4 years, and we'll probably keep doing it.
The damage is easy to see, but many are tonight saying solutions will be harder to find than just one budget headline. Chris Choi, News at 10.
So what's key about this video broadcast that the ITV did was the fact that it tells you what they're going to be using the tax revenue for. In some cases, for example, some taxes have been criticised as simply creating tax revenue. So, for example, when the sugar tax was introduced in some states in America, there was a lot of criticism because they believed that they were simply doing it to help some of the states with tax revenue because they were struggling financially. However, what the UK have done is they've created a hypothecated tax. Now, what a hypothecated tax is they're taxing for a specific purpose, and the tax revenue will go towards that purpose. So, obviously, they're taxing on sugary drinks because it causes healthcare problems, and especially with children. And then they're using the tax revenue to then expend it within physical education. So not only are they trying to discourage the consumption of these sugary drinks, but they're also using the tax revenue to try and make children healthier, which is, again, absolutely crucial. And we can see that within the video, as it said, that it's one of the #1 leading reasons why children are being admitted to hospital because of obesity issues, because of diabetes, and so on. So in terms of the negative externalities that these sugary drinks can obviously incur, we can look at it in terms of these headlines. The tax on sugary drinks could save the NHS $15 million a year, claim study. And the reason for that is, you can think about if it is one of the leading reasons as to why children are being admitted, then obviously every time they're being admitted to hospital is costing the NHS money, it's costing the taxpayer money as well. So it's impacting the third party. So not only is it harming consumers, but it's also harming society based on that. So child health campaigners calculate duty on sweetened drinks could save 300 million over 20 years and reduce the number of cases of diabetes by 50,000. That really tells you the impact that these sugary drinks are actually having on society and having, obviously, on the public. So what we can see here, if we look at the negative externalities graph, if we're doing it based on the benefits to society of the consumption of this drink, every time we look at consumption, we look at it as in terms of like a demand curve. So we can see here, that's the marginal private benefits. So that's the benefits to the producer of the consumption of these sugary drinks. And that's the benefit to society, again, of the consumption of these sugary drinks. Now, because we're not really focusing at this moment in time on the cost, we just have marginal social cost equals marginal private cost, because what we're really focusing on is the benefits, okay, of the consumption. So if we're looking at cost, then it'd be a supply curve. But if we're looking at benefits, then it's based on consumption, and it'd be a demand curve. Now, we can see here that the marginal private benefit is greater than the marginal social benefit, hence why it's a negative externality. The introduction of the tax should place a cost to the private firm, and it should reduce the cost to the private firm, especially if they decide to absorb the cost, which some of the companies are perhaps doing. So again, what that does, it causes a shift, and it causes a shift of marginal social cost equals marginal private cost plus the tax. And what that does, it increases the costs to the firm, which reduces the quantity and helps the society, because as we can see here, Q1 goes to Q2, and that is what society would rather prefer. They would rather the quantity of these sugary drinks be discouraged, and the society would rather, and again, that's why the government are intervening, to try and reduce the quantity being consumed. Now, it's already proven to be successful at this moment in time, or it's starting to show progress in a very short period of time, because Iron Brew, a massive fizzy drink and soft drink brand, have now completely ditched their old recipe. And the reason for that is because it had a massive amount of sugar content. So what they've done is they've got rid of their old recipe, they've not even kept it, they've completely developed the product, and they've brought out a low sugar alternative. So as it says here, the crackdown on sugar in the UK has resulted in the end of production for the beloved sugary beverage Iron Brew. So confirmed by its producers, AG Bars, the production of the soft drink has ceased completely as the company strives to adhere to the new UK government regulations targeting soft drinks, which officially will go into effect. Obviously, it already has gone into effect now this April. So as it shows that it is having some impact, many fizzy drinks are trying to adapt their recipes. They're trying to bring in less sugar content, and they're trying to help, again, I suppose, facilitate the movement towards healthy eating for consumers and reduce the negative externalities on society. Now, you could say that, are they doing it simply because of the government? Are they doing it because the government are putting that pressure on? Well, that's the whole reason why the government needs to intervene. Because if the government didn't intervene, then the fizzy drinks, the soft drink industry, would maybe have no incentive of doing so. But what's also interesting about this Iron Brew, this certain story, is it's been criticised by many of Iron Brew's customers. And Iron Brew definitely has a loyal following in, for example, Scotland. So as it says in the last paragraph of this headline, although a recent poll proved Iron Brew drinkers were so invested in saving their drink from its dire fate, they're even willing to pay a sugary tax on the drink. Now, that last statement creates a problem, because if consumers are not fazed by this sugar tax, then simply the fizzy drink producers they're just literally going to add the cost of the tax to the price, and therefore the burden is going to fall onto the consumer. And it's almost proving that these sugary drinks are inelastic. They're price inelastic in some way. Now, I'm not saying they're addictive, but I'm sure that there's medical experts that would say that these sugary drinks do have an addictive element towards them, but it also could be to do with the lack of alternatives. If the government believes that the consumers would simply switch from fizzy drinks to, for example, water, then obviously that's very naive. So there has to be more competition in the market with healthier alternatives. Now, I would probably say currently in the market there's a lot of more expensive alternatives, and therefore some consumers actually still find that these sugary drinks, even though they've gone up in price, still cheaper than the healthier alternatives. So it's not going to de-incentivise them from that demand. So if we give the example of, in Scotland, Iron Brew having inelastic qualities, then we could say that actually this is going to cause something known as tax incidence. Now, tax incidence relates to, again, the price elasticity, but what it states is, if it's inelastic and the quantity responsiveness of demand is actually very low, then the burden we pass on to the customer, and again, if we're thinking about certain customer groups, then that's going to be more harmful to the lower income customer group. So as we can see, the relative burden or incidence of an indirect tax is determined by the price elasticity of demand of the consumer response to a price rise. If the consumer is unresponsive, as it appears Iron Brew customers are, then it's inelastic, and the burden will mainly fall to the consumer. However, if the consumer is responsive to the price rise and it's elastic, then obviously the burden will fall mainly on the firm. So what we need is a market of healthy, affordable alternatives for this to really work. And we need to make sure that we're trying to tackle the addictive nature maybe of these drinks as well. But as we can see from this diagram, this shaded bit here is the burden that's on the consumer, and the reason for that is because of this inelastic curve here. The quantity responsiveness is very, very low, especially in comparison to the price. So the producer at this moment in time with a very small burden will probably just think, well, if there's still demand, we may as well just pass it on to the price, and we know the consumer will still purchase it. So it's not really providing an incentive to the producer to even change their recipe, never mind actually stopping the production of the good. That's why Iron Brew's decision is, I suppose, a little bit strange in Scotland. Maybe not across the rest of the UK, but in Scotland it could be considered strange, and maybe there's other reasons why they've done so, and maybe they're speculating about what it could mean in the future. But just to kind of prove this point further, I'm going to just play you a video based on just in terms of not just sugar tax, but sin tax and tax on fatty foods.
Country sugar tax system underway in Brighton, where you are. Just tell us how that's working. Are many people actually imposing it?
Yes, some are opposing, but I do think the weakness of the voluntary tax that's been introduced in Brighton is that people just simply aren't going to go along with it. They don't see the problem of sugar as that urgent, particularly when I speak to businesses, restaurants and so on, and restaurant owners in Brighton. They don't see excess sugar consumption as a problem in relation to health, particularly in relation to children's health. And that's what I've found with the studies that I've conducted over the last 2 months. Across the board, it seems that there is no consensus that it's sugar that's causing obesity. And that's very much reflected in the opinions and views of the people I'm talking to in Brighton, where this, as we said, this voluntary tax has been introduced.
Maggie on text has got in touch to say, if I had my way, I'd put a 50% tax on everything containing sugar. An anonymous texter says there should not be a tax on fizzy drinks. I'm 38 and love my fizzy drinks. Why should I have to pay more tax? We already pay 20% on it. And an anonymous texter, is this country being run by a cook now? Maybe Jamie should remember his origins. It's up to the individual. If we want to buy sugary drinks, advise, don't preach. He has the wage not to have to worry about tax. Karina and Simone, one word that was used a little earlier in the discussion was preachy. Do you find any of this
Yeah,
preachy?
it is very preachy. Jamie Oliver's school dinners and healthy food failed was because lower income families, which it was directed at, they found that processed foods are a half to a third cheaper than buying fresh alternatives. And that's why that failed. I live on a council estate, and many of the families are lower income families. And to them, money is very important, budget is huge when they're buying food. For example, my food bill is £600 a month. I have a child with autism, and her behaviour when she's eating processed food to fresh is very, very different. You find the sugars, the fats, they contribute to behaviour quite a lot. But when, for example, if I make chicken nuggets, I buy the chicken breast, the eggs, the breadcrumbs. That's costing me £6–7, and you can go to a supermarket and buy a bag of chicken nuggets for £3. Lower income families are not going to make it from fresh.
So what's the answer? How does that
I think that you have to look at other ways. I mean, there's lots of foods that are going to landfill because they're not suitable to be sold in supermarkets because they're the wrong shape or they're a bit odd. I think those should be available to lower income families at a discounted price, and they will be able to eat and drink a lot healthier. I don't think putting a sugar tax on is going to fix the problem.
Thank you all.
So, as the video demonstrated there is mixed reviews or mixed opinions based on this sugar tax. But the lady towards the end of the video, when she was talking about, again, the consumers with a lower income, then it is going to be a greater burden on those consumers. They're the ones that are going to be directly hit more than any other customer group, and then again the producer. So they're the ones who are really going to be harmed, because if you think about it also, the higher income can afford the healthier alternatives if they choose to. The lower income, at the moment there is a lack of healthier alternatives, and therefore they might find it difficult, and they may still choose to purchase the fizzy drinks, but now at a higher price, which is impacting their disposable income. So you could look at it from that point of view. Now, the sugar tax, it has been implemented in other countries, and it's had mixed reports, mixed success rates. So if we think about Denmark, it completely failed. They didn't do it on sugary drinks, they did it on food with quite high fat content. And what they found was that it was actually really damaging to the food industry, and that there was a lot of resentment in the economy because they believed it was actually having a negative impact on jobs, on employment within the food industry. So they weren't happy about it. But also, what they found was a lot of consumers were just importing these fatty foods, and they were actually travelling across the border to take them back with them into Denmark. And therefore it just completely failed. What they also found was there was a lot of the Denmark or Danish citizens were believing that there wasn't an obesity problem. And if you do compare Denmark to the rest of the world, their obesity rating is much lower. So maybe they didn't feel that there was actually a need for it, and that's why it wasn't successful. In some states in America, as I've already mentioned, it hasn't been implemented very well, the tax. And again, some consumers, it's almost caused government failure, because what they found, especially in I don't know, I'd say Philadelphia, this was proven in Philadelphia, that they were actually buying alcoholic drinks rather than sugary drinks, because the alcoholic drinks were cheaper than the sugary drinks. So when they were looking for alternatives, they were actually looking for alternatives which again had possibly worse negative externalities. So another example of why in some countries it hasn't worked. So it'll be interesting to see if it is successful within the UK.